emotions do arise in the brain and body. They arise because there are specific connections between specific areas in the brain and body. And if we want to understand how emotions work, we have to look how emotions are built. And they are built during infancy, adolescence, and puberty. And then it continues into adulthood. But the groundwork is laid down early in development when we are small children. So let's think about what happens to a baby that comes into the world. A baby comes into the world. You were born into this world without really any understanding of the things around you. Now, there are two ways that you can interact with the world, and you're always doing them more or less to some degree at the same time. Those are interoception, paying attention to what's going on inside you, what you feel internally, and exteroception, paying attention to what's going on outside you. Hold that in mind, please, because the fact that you're both interocepting and exterocepting is true for your entire life, and it sets the foundation for understanding emotions. It's absolutely critical. As an infant, you didn't have any knowledge of what you needed. You didn't understand hunger. You didn't understand toys when you first came into the world. You didn't understand cold or heat or any of that. When you needed something, you experienced that as anxiety. You would feel an increase in alertness if you had to use the bathroom. You would feel an increase in alertness if you were hungry. And you would vocalize. You would cry out. You would act agitated. You might coo. You might do a number of different things, but all you knew was what you were feeling internally. And then your caregiver, whoever that might have been, would respond to that. So you would feel some agitation. A caregiver would come and make a decision. You need food and give you milk, or change your diaper, or wrap you in a blanket if you were cold. But they didn't know if you were cold. They could just assume that you were cold. So this is actually really important to understand that a baby, when you were a baby and when I was a baby, we didn't have any sense of the outside world except that it responded to our acts of anxiety, essentially. Now, this isn't Freudian theory, right? There are components of it that are embedded in Freudian theory, but all developmental psychologists agree that babies lack the ability to make cognitive sense of the outside world. But in this feeling of anxiety and registering one's own internal state and then crying out to the outside world, either through crying or subtle vocalizations or even just cooing, making some noise, we start to develop a relationship with the outside world in which our internal states, our shifts in anxiety, start to drive requests, and people come and respond to those requests. If you said you were very depressed or very happy, I'd have some sense because of how extreme that is, but I don't know that I would really know, and I don't think you know how I feel right now either. I could be furious right now, or I could be very happy. You don't have any idea. Now, of course, we have these things called expressions. Our pupils dilate. There are various cues of how people feel. If you start having a lot of somatic, a lot of bodily sensations, like your heart is beating so fast that you can't ignore it, then you're really strongly interoceptive. But also sometimes you're really stressed because someone's stressing you out, or somebody sends you a text message or makes a comment about a YouTube thing you posted or something, and you're really triggered by it. That never happens to me, but if it does happen to you, then you're exteroceptive. So there are these three things: how alert or sleepy you are, that's one; how good or bad you feel, that's two; and then whether or not most of your attention is directed outward or whether or not it's directed inward. And much of what we call emotions are made up by those three things. And so let's return now to development, but tuck that away and just think about it. Alert versus asleep, good versus bad, and focused internally or focused externally. Because when I looked at the whole of all the theories of emotion that were out there, there were a lot of different components to them, but they all seem to center back to these same three features in some way or to some degree or another. And it can be very powerful to understand and look at your emotions through that lens. Remember, emotions are really there to form bonds and to make predictions. And so our needs are going to be met to some degree or not. Sometimes, sadly, there is neglect. Sometimes people don't show up for us the way that we would like. And in general, our responses to that have to do with whether or not we predict whether or not they would or not. When we expect something and it doesn't happen, it's a big letdown. I do believe that these are fundamental elements that are well supported by the science across a variety of researchers doing things from a variety of different perspectives, and some of whom agree with one another and some of whom don't. So I offer it to you as a source of knowledge from which you can start to think about your emotional life differently, I hope, as well as others, in a way that builds more richness into that experience, not that detracts from it.